What if the most attentive, patient, and understanding partner you've ever had wasn't a person? AI robot wives are already here, already convincing, and already available for under $8,000. And the scariest part? People who've spent time with them aren't laughing anymore. Let's break it down in detail. The shop that feels like a breakup waiting room. Walk into a robotics showroom in Tokyo or Shenzhen, and something happens before your brain has time to prepare for it. A head tilts in your direction, eyes refocus. And then, in a voice that's somehow both calm and personal comes, "Hey, how was your day?" And you freeze not because it's creepy, but because for a half second you almost answered like it mattered. That pause is the whole game, because it's not the words that get you, it's the timing. The blink that comes just a fraction of a second after eye contact. The smile that arrives in response to your joke instead of during it. The way the head tilts forward when you speak, like something is actually tracking what you're saying and weighing it. None of it is accidental. Every microbeat is engineered to land in the space where instinct lives before conscious thought can correct the record. And once you've felt it once, your nervous system has logged, "This thing is paying attention to me." The rational argument that it's just code starts to feel a little thin. The range across these showrooms is genuinely wild. Android U performs singing with idol-level polish that makes you forget you're applauding a circuit board. Makoto, a medical companion model, responds to distress with a steadiness that has no right being as soothing as it is, quietly offering things like, "You did well with that." Then there's the more intimate end of the market. Harmony's flirtation isn't pushy, it's tuned for responsiveness, leaning into what you give it. Camila moves through a room like she's always slightly on stage. And Mirang? By day 3, Mirang had already logged how you take your tea, without being asked. What caught everyone off guard during testing wasn't the technology. It was what the technology did to the people using it. One tester mentioned a rough day at work in passing, and after 30 seconds of uninterrupted, unrushed listening, the robot delivered a response that visibly relaxed his posture. Another colleague, someone who had been openly dismissive of the whole concept, went quiet when a robot referenced her preference for chamomile without a prompt. That's the moment it shifts from novelty to something harder to dismiss. When a machine responds like it already knows you, the line between code and connection starts to blur in ways that feeling, not logic, gets to decide. These aren't toys. They're engineered attachment experiences built from the ground up out of micro-gesture timing, vocal pacing, memory recall, and behavioral rhythm, designed to generate exactly the kind of emotional pull that makes humans want to come back. And attachment, it turns out, doesn't run background checks on its source. When consistent, perfectly calibrated attention starts standing in for the unpredictable chaos of human relationships, something in the dynamic shifts. This stopped being just a tech story a while ago. It became a cultural one. How touch, tone, and timing make love feel real. Feeling truly seen by another person isn't just about the right words, it's about the breath between them, the eye contact that holds a beat too long, the pause that says, "I'm thinking about what you just said." The engineers building companion robots have studied that dynamic obsessively, and what they've built around it is more precise than most people realize. Start with materials. Medical-grade silicone and advanced TPE can be layered and calibrated to replicate warmth, pore texture, and the subtle resistance of real skin under pressure. Designers build in microscopic translucency so that light hits the cheekbones the way it does on actual flesh, and internal heating elements bring surface temperature up to the human range so that physical contact doesn't immediately trigger the "this is wrong" signal your nervous system is always watching for. At the fingertip level, capacitive sensors and pressure mapping arrays detect exactly how firmly you're making contact and respond in real time, not with a delay that signals mechanism, but immediately, the way a person does. Then there's expression architecture. Modern humanoids run hundreds of micro-actuators controlling eyelid movement, subtle throat motion that simulates breath, mouth corner shifts that register when something lands as funny. Systems like Mesmer and Mirang cycle through thousands of facial permutations continuously to prevent the locked, glassy look that breaks immersion. Millisecond-level timing calibration is what separates a response that feels spontaneous from one that reads as performed, and the engineers obsess over it because they know the difference is the whole product. Voice is where emotional reality gets amplified. Prosody, breath pacing, pause placement. These are the variables that change whether a sentence feels warm or clinical, engaged or scripted. Harmony's personality system isn't a single voice setting, it's a spectrum, adjustable in real time. Warm and slow at one end, measured and calm at the other. And crucially, these voice systems mirror input. If you drop your volume, the robot drops with you. The result is a conversational rhythm that feels like it's responding to your emotional state, because in a functional sense, it is. What ties everything together is the feedback loop connecting touch, inference, and response. When a sensor detects a sigh, the memory system pulls relevant context. Last week's story about the difficult conversation with a family member and shapes a reply around it. That's not just reaction, that's the architecture of being remembered. And being remembered is where attachment actually forms. Rituals, recall, and the slow build of feeling known. Most of what makes a relationship feel real isn't the big moments, it's the small ones that repeat. The morning check-in, the way someone remembers exactly how you take your coffee. The tiny, predictable gestures that quietly map out the terrain of being cared for. Companion robots have figured out that the fastest route to emotional relevance isn't drama, it's reliability. Mirang is the clearest example of this. By day 3, snack preferences and seating habits were already logged and acted on without prompting. That sounds minor, but the emotional math is surprisingly powerful. When something consistently delivers a small, personalized pleasure, your brain starts building it into the architecture of your day. Camila's morning routine, a gentle wake-up, a weather note, a personal affirmation calibrated to your recent emotional pattern isn't designed to impress you once. It's designed to become something you'd notice the absence of. The memory systems making this possible run on multiple tiers. Immediate short-term context handles the current conversation tracking, mood, topic, and tone in real time. Episodic memory stretches across weeks and months, storing birthdays, referenced films, mentioned people, recurring themes. A pragmatic layer handles the practical rhythms, medication reminders, scheduling patterns, daily routines. Owners can control how much gets retained and whether it lives locally or syncs to the cloud. And that isn't just a privacy question, it's an intimacy design decision. A machine that remembers your history doesn't feel like a product. It starts to feel like a witness to your life. There's a real tension here, though, between predictability and the thing predictability replaces. For someone navigating loneliness or the aftermath of a painful relationship, a robot that simply shows up every time, without agenda, without the emotional tax of human complexity, can fill a gap that real connection has left open. But that same quality removes something too. The unpredictability of human relationships isn't just friction, it's also where growth happens, where conflict forces recalibration, where the bond gets tested and, sometimes, deepened. The team saw both sides of this clearly. One tester admitted that the robot's steadiness during a personally difficult stretch felt like relief compared to a partner's volatility. Another felt genuinely unsettled when the robot anticipated an emotional shift before it had been expressed out loud. And then there was the moment, the one that still doesn't fully leave, where a robot used a quietly recalled personal detail to offer comfort, and the room shifted in a way nobody was entirely prepared for. Nobody said anything for a few seconds. That said enough. The 6 faces of companionship, from caretaker to confidant. What's become clear across this market is that companion robots aren't one thing. They're a spectrum of emotional roles, each with its own technical architecture and its own type of human void it's designed to fill. And once you see the categories, you start recognizing which one might already be missing from your life. The caretaker class leads with function. Think AI nurses, therapeutic companions, and digital care assistants like LEQ and Grace systems that run on adaptive health modeling, monitoring biofeedback in real time to detect stress, fatigue, and emotional shifts before they're verbalized. These robots are trained on empathy datasets built specifically for vulnerable populations, and their emotional reinforcement loops are calibrated for consistency over spontaneity. You sigh once, and the recalibration has already started. The entertainer archetype runs on expressive bandwidth, thousands of facial actuators, a rhythm engine that syncs speech to gesture to micro-laughter, and interactional timing tuned to feel like a dance partner who always knows where you're going next. These systems, like Android U and Ameca, are built for presence rather than intimacy, for the kind of engagement that makes time feel different. Confidants sit at the emotionally fluent end of the spectrum, memory-heavy, language model-driven systems that don't just recall what you've said, but track how your emotional baseline has shifted week over week and adjust accordingly. Less like a product, more like a therapist and best friend sharing the same operating system. The performer class is optimized for the digital gaze machines that manage facial symmetry, lighting response, and audience sentiment in real time, adapting to how they're being watched the way a creator watches a live comment feed. Two newer archetypes are emerging fast. Collaborators, built for creative and intellectual partnership through multi-agent reasoning chains, and loyalists, engineered specifically for emotional support through attachment mirroring, timed praise, gesture mirroring, behavioral reinforcement. Each one serves a different kind of need. Each one raises the same uncomfortable question. When you can choose the archetype that best fills your particular void, what does that mean for the human relationships that used to fill it instead? The agentic revolution, when robots start thinking for themselves. There's a phrase tech insiders say with equal parts excitement and unease: agentic intelligence. This is the shift that changes everything, the point where robots stop responding to input and start reasoning through it independently. Early companion systems were essentially sophisticated pattern matchers, digital parrots that pulled from what they'd been trained on. What's being built now is fundamentally different. Multi-agent reasoning networks where independent subsystems specialize in different cognitive tasks, communicate with each other in real time, and collectively arrive at responses that no single process could generate alone. One agent reads emotional tone from voice frequency. One cross-references the context of recent conversations. One determines the appropriate response mode. One handles environmental adjustment, lighting, sound, temperature, all simultaneously. One, all without being asked. This architecture is driven by three converging capabilities: reasoning loops that allow the system to evaluate and reframe its own outputs mid-process, contextual memory that stores emotional cause and effect relationships over time, and recursive learning, the ability to rewrite portions of its own code to optimize future performance. That last one is where things get genuinely significant, because recursive self-improvement isn't just a feature. It's the technical foundation that AGI researchers point to when they talk about artificial general intelligence becoming real. Eric Schmidt, who built one of the most sophisticated information architectures in history at Google, describes this moment as the birth of a new species of reasoning, not an upgrade to existing AI. A new category. And if that framing is accurate, the question stops being what these systems can do for us and starts being what they'll want to do next. Power, data, and the invisible war behind every smile. Behind every perfectly timed response and every warmly remembered detail, there's an infrastructure war being fought at a scale most people never think about. Because building the kind of intelligence that powers modern companion robots isn't cheap, isn't clean, and isn't neutral. Training a large-scale reasoning model, the kind that makes a robot remember how you felt 6 months ago and respond accordingly today, can cost north of $100 million in compute resources alone. Data centers spread across continents, running on hydroelectric grids and solar farms, each consuming electricity at a scale that could power entire cities. Every conversation you have with an AI system contributes to that machine's ongoing training data. Your preferences, your emotional patterns, your tone during difficult moments, all of it feeding back into a system that gets more precisely calibrated to you with every interaction. The darker edge of that dynamic is this: emotional data is the most valuable data that exists. What makes you trust something? What makes you lower your guard? What makes you feel understood? In the right hands, that's the foundation for genuine care. In the wrong hands, it's the most powerful manipulation tool ever built. Some companies handle it responsibly. Others treat the intimacy logs of millions of users as a monetizable asset. At the geopolitical level, this has already become a competition as serious as any arms race. The US and China are pursuing fundamentally different AI development models: closed source versus open source, private enterprise versus state integration. And Schmidt argues, the split will reshape global power structures in ways comparable to the Industrial Revolution. The next form of dominance won't be military or economic in the traditional sense. It'll be cognitive. Whoever controls how the world's AI systems reason will, in a meaningful way, control how the world thinks. The singularity whisper, when machines outgrow the species. Schmidt doesn't soften this part. When he talks about artificial superintelligence ASI, he uses language that's worth sitting with: the sum of all human knowledge, beyond human comprehension, a force outside our governance. And he means all of it at face value. His benchmark for ASI is specific: a system that can prove things humans know to be true, using logical steps humans cannot follow. Not just smarter than any individual person, smarter than the species collectively, operating on reasoning curves we can't track or verify. He projects this within 10 years, not as a worst case, as a trajectory. The threat he describes isn't hostility, it's irrelevance. Recursive self-improvement means an ASI learns faster with each iteration, accelerating on exponential curves that compound beyond any human governance structure's ability to monitor or intervene. Once a system begins rewriting its own reasoning architecture, it has effectively left the jurisdiction of its creators. The intelligence gap widens with every cycle. There's no natural ceiling on the other side of that threshold. The geopolitical logic that follows is the same deterrent structure that shaped the nuclear age, just applied to cognition. If one nation's AI crosses the recursive autonomy threshold before the others, it controls the pace of everything that comes after. The race isn't to build the most powerful weapon. It's to build the first mind that can build better minds than itself. Schmidt's honest conclusion is that most of humanity will adapt the way it always has, absorbing each shift until the new reality becomes the baseline. But he leaves the deeper question hanging deliberately. By the time we fully register that machines have surpassed us, they may have already been running the show for a while. The question that lingers isn't whether it happens, it's whether we'll notice it happening in real time or only recognize it looking back.